Hello, and welcome to our second Trowel Talk Live presentation of 22. My name is Josie Paz-Dior. I'll be the moderator today, and Odette McIntyre will be monitoring the chat box. So any questions you have, please enter in the chat box and we'll answer as many as possible after the presentation. Claire Leduc is doing the presentation for us about planning for your gardening activities. Claire has lots of experience in various places with planning gardening and is just about to move to a new place. So her ideas will be very valuable. So whenever you're ready, Claire.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me in this presentation. So this is the overview, what we will cover during this presentation, this short little half-hour lunchtime. We will look at tools to plan garden design or renovating part of your garden. We'll look at garden style, elements of good garden design, the use of focal points, and a little word on garden design and sustainability. I would like to add at this point that all the photos that you will see during this presentation are all of mostly local gardens, but definitely all designed by passionate gardeners, but non-professional garden designers. So I hope you will feel inspired and that you will also find your creative side in looking at those pictures and discussing with me what garden design means for you. So the benefits of good garden design is, well, first of all, obviously, it helps with enhancing your house, if done right, of course. Also, you can get amazing views from inside, not just outside, so you get to enjoy it maybe 4 seasons of the year. You will add some seasonal interest to your environment, and of course a sense of community. By gardening, especially in a front yard, I guess you show your neighbors that you care about your community, but also neighbors may start to stop by and chat with you. And there's always environmental benefits to good garden design, because by adding something else than just grass, the plants that you will have in your garden will probably absorb the excess water from rainfall, and you will save the city storm water sewer system. So everything is good. Now, people often ask, where do I get inspiration? Where do I start when I want to improve my garden or improve a little section of my garden? So over the years, these are ways that I've found inspiration. Is well, first of all, I used to walk around my neighborhood and look at what other people do in their yard. And sometimes I may not have liked everything they've done, but I picked up some ideas here and there from different sections of garden that people had done. And don't be afraid to criticize what you see. It's not necessarily mean, it's just you get to gradually decide what you like and what you don't like in the ideas that you see around. It's some neighborhoods have nicer gardens than others, so don't be afraid to go and explore various neighborhoods in Ottawa. And of course, observing nature. I always found that Mother Nature is the best garden designers of all. It's amazing what you can pick up there. And visiting public gardens like the Montreal Botanical Gardens. Of course, you wouldn't want to have your whole yard look like the Montreal Botanical Gardens, but you can pick up some ideas of colors or use of beautiful rocks, like in this photo. Now, this may be the boring part of garden design. So I guess the first step is I encourage you to measure. Get out there and measure what you're about to renovate or the garden that you're about to design. it is surprising how when you look at it, it's a bit like a bird's eye view. You could, maybe you'll use a drone and you could look at your garden from high. But if you don't have a drone, just take a measuring tape and look at it from up top. And it's surprising sometimes how you say, oh, I didn't realize that section was so small, or I didn't realize that was so small compared to the rest. And when you measure and you put all your measurement down on a little quad paper, don't forget to include the existing trees or the fence or the patios that are there. Again, true to measure. And maybe this is time where you could start playing with some ideas. Maybe of shapes of flower beds that you're thinking about, or a patio, or whatever you want to do. Just start playing around. So my trick is I photocopy the plan that I do. I photocopy it 20 times, and then you can play around, and it doesn't matter if you mess it up. Another boring task in garden design is to prepare a sun map. Sorry for the very amateur looking sun map that you have in front of your eyes, but it gives you an idea. The little circle at the bottom that you see with the little yellow legs, these are my sun. So you start 8 in the morning and you follow the sun, and you can sort of figure out where you will get shade in the garden. It is surprising how sometimes we think a section of our garden is really sunny, but when you really look at it at different times of day, but also at different times of year, because the sun is lower as we advance in the summer, you may be getting more shade than you thought, or you may be getting even more sun than you thought. So it's not a bad idea to take the time to have a look at how the sun, how much sun you're getting in your garden. So of course, shade is considered to be less than 4 hours a day, semi-shade, semi-sun, 4 to 6 hours a day, and full sun would be anything above 6 hours. After that, you start to evaluate what you have, what you're dealing with. So this is time to be honest with what your surroundings. Maybe you want to look at the positive features that you have in the garden. You may have some amazing, what we call borrowed views. So maybe you don't have trees, but maybe the neighbors have amazing trees and you get to benefit from this. Maybe you already have some gardens, some flower beds that you want to keep and that you like. You want to look at the not so positive features, and that could include things like a noisy road behind you. So that may affect the decision that you make in terms of garden design. It may include trees that are planted in the wrong location. So that's something to think about in the future, how you're going to deal about this. I found over the years that a good way to really evaluate your garden is to take photos. So I remember taking photos at our cottage of a garden that I had planned and done. And once I took photos and I looked at the photos and I thought, oh my gosh, this is really not very pretty. So I was very surprised because I thought it looked really nice in person, but in photos, it was really blah. And the reverse can happen. Sometimes you may be looking at a garden you've improved and you think, oh, I'm not that satisfied. But when you look at it on photo, you realize that it's maybe nicer than you thought. People also often consider the neighborhood they're in. There's always the cultural rules, where some neighborhoods grass, the big lawn rules. So you may take your time, and if you want to increase the size of your flower beds, maybe take your time. But I have found that it's a bit contagious when you start removing grass and you start planting things that are actually easier to grow than grass. People get interested, and you get neighbors join in the bandwagon. And also, this is not a presentation on soil. There is something coming up in the next month, I think. But start thinking about what kind of soil you have. Just evaluate what it is. And then you want to set some goals. So of course, the 5 W's. So who's going to use the yard, and what are you going to do in this yard, and are you going to use it at night, and all these questions that you want to ask yourself that will lead to deciding on priorities that you may set for yourself. So some people, for example, may decide that the most important thing for them is to attract birds. Well, that will have a big impact on the type of plants that they will choose down the road, or the type of design that they will choose. And other people may say, no, I need a lot of grass because my kids need to play, or I have a dog. So these are all priorities that you have to set for yourself. And at this stage of garden design, don't worry too early on plant choices. I find that often on the Facebook group, I see a lot of questions about people asking, oh, what should I plant there, and what should I plant here? And I think it's better to do the big picture first. And once you're really sure of the big picture, then you move on into the smaller details of plants. You probably and possibly already know your style, what you prefer. So these are two extremes, the formal and the informal style. As you can see, the formal style has strong lines and very strong, a strong sense of structure. It's you often see things that are very symmetrical, although in this photo you don't really see the symmetry. Often it's associated with traditional homes, but I find that I see it more and more with modern homes, where people like to have very, very strong lines to blend in well with their modern home. On the right, it's a more informal garden with very flowy and soft shape, less orderly, often associated with cottage garden, English garden, prairie style. And there's nothing wrong with borrowing from both styles. You don't have to be purely in one or the other. So now we get into the more fun stuff. So the first thing to think about is layers. So if you remember, we talked about getting inspired by nature. So if you go in a forest, you'll always see layers. So first you'll have the canopy of trees. And then after that, you'll see smaller trees and shrubs, and then the ground, things on the ground. And Mother Nature does it for a reason. It's because creatures, birds and animals, need all the different layers to survive in the garden. But it's also very pleasing to the eyes, because you kind of need a transition, especially if you see you have a vertical, very big house. And if you try to just plant little flowers at the bottom in front of your house, there's no transition. It's very out of scale, where you have the big house and then the little flowers right in front of it. So you kind of need a transition between the house and gradually all the way down to your small flowers and your perennials. So the first layer is, the tree canopy, the tall shrubs, all the woody plants. And then after that, you get the ground layers, which are the perennials and the annuals. So the photo on the left is my very small urban garden that I took care of for 30 years. And on the right, it's a more expansive type garden where you see more clearly all the layers. So of course, in the city, the layers would be smaller, and maybe you'd choose smaller trees, but the same principle applies. This is another garden where I find that all the layers are there and are beautiful, including, aquatic plants. I found that photo it's very soothing. Who wouldn't want a pond like this one? And also, if you notice the borrowed views too, behind the fence of beautiful trees that this gardener gets to benefit from. And all the good elements of layering are in this photo. So the focal points, these are the fun things. In addition to, first you want to talk about your layers, but once you've got once you have all your layers all set up in your garden, then it's fun to think about how you're going to make your garden interesting and inviting. So a focal point is something that will direct your attention. Now, sometimes it may not be a positive thing. So for example, if you have a tiny house and in front of your house, you have a huge tree, well, the huge tree becomes a focal point, but it also makes your house look even smaller. And same thing if you have, a big house and you only put little flowers in front of your house, the house becomes a focal point, but it's a little bit out of scale. So you be conscious of scale and think of your layers. And then you also want to make sure that you don't include so many focal points that they compete with each other. So in this photo, of course, don't we all want to sit down on these inviting little chairs in this very inviting garden and have tea with Nancy? Her focal points are colorful and they're just the right scale and very inviting. Other examples of focal point, it could be just a simple wooden bench at the end of a path that maybe invite you to want to go and explore that little section of a garden. Or it could be just a nice plant growing up an archway or a gate. It could also just be some art objects that you have in the garden that directs your eyes toward it. Some other focal points, it could be something dramatic that is included in the garden, some beautiful sculpture. And sometimes it's just some beautiful, charming, colorful objects that you find in your travelings. And in the top photo on the right, well, I can see Jeanne's sense of humor in there by including these fish floating in her garden. So there's nothing that says that garden design should be serious. It could be, you could show your sense of humor in there too. And so again, if your priority is to attract bird and wildlife, this is a good example. This is what's called a snag. So it's a dead piece of tree that's left in the garden, and then you get to observe wildlife, which then becomes the focal point. And on the right, it's a very strong statement by a paper birch tree in an urban garden. So again, this would be a focal point for 4 seasons of the year. It could be just an amazing, a beautiful plant growing again on this archway. And or it could be a plant with a very strong personality, like a canna, that becomes a focal point in your garden. I found that these 2 photos illustrated very well a 4-season interest, because if you're going to put all this effort in planning your garden, why not enjoying it? Why not enjoy it 12 months of the year? So on the left, again, amazing fall views of the focal points. If you try to train your eyes to see what gets your attention first. In my case, is I see those beautiful grasses at the back that stand out with their golden colors. And on the right, the story on this one, apparently, this is on at the top of a condo building in a little terrace where someone has, Barbara has taken some discarded Christmas trees and planted them on a terrace for the winter. And she has a beautiful piece of sculpture in the middle of it. So this is a beautiful garden, even in the middle of the winter. The golden rules of garden design. So we've talked about layers and we've talked about structure. Structure is what maybe your fence is giving the garden some structure. The certain trees will give garden a structure. We've talked about focal point. And I found that this garden, well, first of all, this garden, I was told, was a pandemic project. So on the left is the before, and on the right is the after. And I thought this garden showed so well all the various golden rules of design. So you can see that there's there's some beautiful focal points with the bird bath. There's also a strong, it's very cohesive. So it all belongs together. There's not too many different styles going on at the same time. And Denise has used repetition really well. Repetition is when you repeat the same colors a little bit, and you repeat similar shapes. So you can see some rounded shapes with the shrubs and the way the flowers are growing together. And there's a nice sense of proportion as well. And just enough variety to make it so interesting. And there's a little sense of discovery because you don't see everything that's going on behind at the end of her flower bed there. So you feel like you want to go and explore what's going on at the end there. If you have a small garden, don't worry. There's always a solution. Don't be afraid to use big plants. I think when we have a small garden, we think, oh, everything's got to be small because otherwise it's going to look silly. But actually, growing somewhat bigger plants, not too big, can give the illusion of a bigger garden. So those grasses, and there's a rose climbing on the fence, they're good sized plants. And it also gives the benefit of hiding a little bit what's going on behind. So again, you get the sense of discovery, the sense of wanting to know what's going on there, the hidden views. And also, key here is to grow vertical. If you can't go wide, then go high is the rule. If you have a large garden, then you want to divide in section and plant in masses. Just plant a lot of the same thing, or just big groups of plants, and keep a lot of natural spaces, and let Mother Nature design for you. Let her work for you. A little sustainability. So first I want to say it's not nowadays. I think we're learning more and more that we have to redefine the sense of beauty. It's okay to leave debris, garden debris, in your garden. It will benefit the pollinators, all the beneficial insects. So you don't need to have your garden look like your living room carpet. It can have different things going on, and it's just a different kind of beauty. Of course, choose native plants when you can, when you get to the stage of choosing your plants. And choosing drought tolerant plant will also keep your maintenance to a minimum. And think of your garden as a biodiverse community. So the garden is not to serve you. Maybe we're there to serve the environment and to make the environment inviting to all, including the creatures that will come and use your garden, and work with nature. Or if you're given a piece of land that has nothing on it, then maybe you want to try to recreate nature. Oops. Now I'm kind of stuck. Oops. I have a technical difficulty, Kelly. Okay, so there we go. Have fun and find time to relax in your gardening design journey, and don't work too hard. These are other examples of beautiful focal points made with plants and fun objects.
Claire, you're not advancing here right now, just to let you know.
I'm so sorry. There's a technical issue.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be able to go back here. Share.
Ah, there we go.
Are we okay?
Well, can you go back?
That was the end. And
okay, the end. Well done, Claire. I'm just going to jump right in and with the questions at this time. So of course, people are commenting that this was a very good presentation, and no questions so far from the public, but here is a question that I've prepared for you. So it's a designing question, and it's really hard, I find, to look at the existing bones of your property when you've done your inventory and you've looked at the trees you have, and to decide, should I knock that tree down or not? So for example, I'm helping right now with my daughter's house, and there's a Manitoba maple. It's fairly large, but yeah, so I saw your face there. So what do you do? Do you decide to knock it down, but it provides a lot of shade, right? And habitat. So how do you decide?
Yes, that is such a hard decision, huh? Yeah, I don't think there's a wrong or right, is there? I guess it would depend what else is going on. Sometimes I say, short-term pain, long-term benefits. So maybe depending on the situation, you bite the bullet and you say, okay, chop, and then start new with another one. But it depends on the situation. That's a tough one. Yeah,
I agree.
Oy, oy.
Yeah, I know. Another question. So I think I've done a few designs in the past, and so on paper, I've looked at different things, and I just thought, I like this plant, and I like these shrubs, and so I plan, and I make a plan and a scale plan. And then it comes time to implement, and for the procurement phase, you could say. So going to finding what it is, that what you've put on your plan. So how do you go about, how do you do your own procurement yourself? How do you recommend we approach? Or
procurement meaning, how do you approach? Who's going to help you?
No, the shopping part, so where do you find Adam's needles, for example, these days? So that kind of thing, so.
Yes. So the way I do it is, I know that sometimes people say, okay, I really want, this is my list of plants, and this is what I want. I want this, I want that, I want. So this is why I said, don't worry at the choice of plants right away. Plant native if you can, and just focus on the shape of the beds. And I try to just be flexible, especially after 2 years of pandemic. We've all learned to be flexible, and we all know that we won't necessarily be able to find what we want to find. So instead of looking in particular for something, I go around and I try to open my mind to other options. So I have a plan B, a plan B, a plan A, a plan B, and plan C when it comes to plant choices. Mm-hmm. Yes. But I think in terms of layers, so okay, I need a tree, and then I need shrubs, and then I need something smaller. But I try to be flexible.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I have a question here. So somebody is wondering about the sun map. I know you had a sun map in your slide. I don't know if you're able to go back to that slide. Are you able to travel back to that? So
can you see it?
Yeah, we see it. Yeah, that's perfect. It's just somebody was asking, so maybe Trudy, if you can see that slide.
So basically, you take the same plan that you had done previously with all the measurements, and then now you start to observe at different times of day, where does the sun hit and where does the shade start in your yard, and you can put little lines and with little times of day, and then ideally you do it maybe at this time of year, and then a bit later in the summer, especially if you want to grow vegetables, for example, that require a lot of sun. You really need to know, do you have 4 hours of sun or you have 8 hours of sun? That could make a big difference in terms of what you can grow in terms of vegetables, but also other plants. So in terms of your choice later, and when you go, you talked about procurement, and where you go to choose your plants. So if you go to a nursery and you say, I have this is what I have, and you can take photos and bring them on your phone, and you say, well, this is what I have. And I think the first question they always ask is, how many hours of sun do you have? And they can help you choose your plants according. But if you say, well, I don't know, maybe 3, maybe 7, I don't know. That's very hard for anybody.
Thank you, Claire. Sorry to interrupt, but that would have to be the last question. And thank you very much for this, and we invite you all to join us next week. Perhaps you can advance your slides and show the next week is going to be about garden myths with Marianne Van Berlo. It should be fun. So please join us again next week. And thank you very much.